Good morning, everyone, and welcome to worship here at First Congregational Church of Concord. Whether you are joining us here in person or you are joining us live on Zoom, we are so glad that you are here and worshiping with us this morning. We'll begin our service of worship by preparing our hearts and our minds in listening to our praises. Just a couple of announcements this morning to highlight. The first is that at noon today on Zoom, I invite you to join with me in reflecting on the traditional worship services that we've shared together in January and February, to reflect on the things that feel like they're connecting us to God, and also let go of the things that perhaps aren't, that perhaps are even standing in our way or stumbling blocks. So again, that will be at noon on Zoom today. And also our Ash Wednesday service is this week on March 2nd, and that'll be right here at 7 p.m., and we hope you will join us for that as well. We will also be having it on Zoom for those who can't get here in person. And to finish our announcements, I actually am going to be sharing a letter of peace, a prayer of peace, from the UCC officers of the National Office, from the Reverend John C. Dorhauer, our General Minister and President, the Reverend Tracy A. Blackman, our Associate General Minister, and the Reverend Karen Georgia Thompson, Associate General Minister. They begin their reflection with a verse of Scripture from Proverbs chapter 6, verses 16 through 19. There are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that divides wicked plans, feet that make haste to run to evil, a false witness who breathes out lies, and one who sows discord among brothers. As attention of the world turns to the ignored cries for peace from the people of Ukraine, we, the officers of the United Church of Christ, join our prayers with those of churches and people of faith all over the globe that the attack against Ukraine will cease. As a just peace church, the United Church of Christ calls for de-escalation of violence and a return to diplomatic negotiations, the only true way conflict ever ceases. We urge our members to pray throughout the day for peace and protection against the evils of war for the people whose lives and well-being are in danger, and to make this Sunday a day of collective prayer and fasting for a peace that only God can bring. Let us pray. Holy God, hear our prayers for all those who will die today because of war in Ukraine and in other war-torn countries all over the world. Grant them an end to the suffering of this world and eternal peace that is only found in you. We pray for the people of Ukraine, Russia, and all nations, that war and any bloodshed can be avoided and a new just peace can be forged out of this crisis. We ask that God grant wisdom to the leaders of nations, calling them to end provocation on all sides and invest instead in the things that make for peace, as called for in all our faith traditions. We pray for an end to the deep insecurity and mistrust on all sides, and call on leaders to build trust based not on military might or alliances, but on the basis of our shared common humanity. Now is the time in which past harm should be acknowledged and addressed, and new partnerships can be envisioned. We pray for and call on our leaders to have the courage to take small, verifiable, independent steps towards peace, inviting others to reciprocate. Now is the time to invest in conflict resolution, diplomacy, and international cooperation, not more weapons which can only escalate tension in the region. Be with those suffering in ways we cannot. Protect them from devastation in ways those positions of authority will not. Shield and comfort them as they confront the terror of violence that surrounds them. Hold them close to your heart and stay the hand of the enemies against them. Give us the courage and the strength to cry aloud against wickedness in high places that dare to harm others made in your image. Comfort the children and heed the cries to be saved from harm in this world. Make us a people who love our children, all of our children, more than we love greed, power, and control. Overturn governments of tyranny wherever they are found. Disrupt the intentions of evil and give us power to stand against demonic forces of greed and control. Grant that peace and justice come to warring nations by the hands of those courageous enough to stand and study war no more. Let thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. As we come together to worship, know that the Holy One bends low at home with the humble, taking up residence in the contrite heart and forming all people in God's image. Come, let us worship. Let us offer thanksgiving and praise to God. I invite you to join with me in singing our opening hymn, which will be number 74. We'll sing verses 1 and 3, and Annie will play through the melody for us first. I invite you to rise in body or spirit. We
come into God's presence with a prayer of invocation. We come before you, O God, and wait for the kindling flame of your Holy Spirit, calling us into fuller and richer lives. You have blessed us by the night's rest and by the morning's light. Open us to your claim on us. Show us your way. Let us live in the Spirit of Jesus Christ, our Savior. Amen.
God has brought the people of the covenant from the land of bondage into freedom. I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join with me in singing our Gloria Patri. God offers us, God offers to us, through prophets and apostles, words of life, which through faith become the word of life. Listen then to that word in these lessons. Hear now Psalm 21 from the Reverend Benjamin Chavis Psalter, which was written in Tillery, North Carolina, inside a prison truck en route to Central Prison, and is titled, Relieve the Bitterness. O God, our God, relieve the bitterness against the oppressors in our hearts, even though we are unjustly wronged by the sins of racism. Let not our hearts be troubled in response by hate and violence, for our faith is in thy redemption. Thou shalt dethrone the tyrant and restore thy creation in love and in peace. Here ends the Psalter lesson. Amen. And now I'd invite Phil to come forward and share our song.
Listen to the word of God in Psalm 27. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When evildoers assail me to devour my flesh, my adversaries and foes, they shall stumble and fall. Though an army encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war rise up against me, yet I will be confident. One thing I ask of the Lord, that will I seek after, to live in the house of the Lord all of the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord, and to inquire in his temple. Here ends the Psalter lesson. Now please listen to the gospel of Jesus Christ according to John.
Glory to you, O Christ.
As he walked along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's work might be revealed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. When he said this, he spat on the ground and made mud with the saliva and spread the mud on the man's eyes, saying to him, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam," which meant sin. Then he sent and went and washed and came back, able to see. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar began to ask, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" Some were saying, "It is he." Others were saying, "No, but if someone like him." He kept saying, "I am the man." But they kept asking him, "Then how were your eyes opened?" He answered, "The man called Jesus made mud, spread it on my eyes, and said to me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' Then I went and washed and received my sight." They said to him, "Where is he?" He said, "I do not know." They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was the Sabbath day when Jesus made mud and opened his eyes. Then the Pharisees also began to ask him how he had received his sight. He said to them, "He put mud on my eyes. Then I washed, and now I see." Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not observe the Sabbath." But others said, "How can a man who is a sinner perform such signs?" And they were divided. So they said again to the blind man, "What do you say about him? It was your eyes he opened." He said, "He is a prophet."
The Jews did not believe that he had been blind and received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked them, "Is this your son, who you say was born blind? How then does he see?" His parents answered, "We know that this is our son, and that he was born blind. But we do not know how it is that he now sees, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself." His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that anyone who confessed Jesus to be the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore his parents said, "He is of age. Ask him." So for the second time they called the man who had been born blind, and they said to him, "Give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner." He answered, "I do not know whether he is a sinner. One thing I do know, though, that I was blind, and now I see." They said to him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered them, "I have already told you, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want also to become his disciples?" Then they reviled him, saying, "You are his disciples, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as to this man, we do not know where he comes from." The man answered, "Here is an astonishing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but he does listen to one who worships him and obeys his will. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." They answered him, "You were born entirely in sin, and you are trying to teach us?" And they drove him out. Jesus heard that they had driven him out, and he went and found him. And he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered, "And who is he, sir? Tell me, so that I may believe in him." Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he." He said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshiped him. Jesus said, "I came into this world for judgment, so that those who do not see may see, and those who do see may become blind." Some of the Pharisees near him heard this and said to him, "Surely we are not blind, are we?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would not have sinned. But now that you say, 'We see,' your sin remains." This is the good news. Praise to you, O Christ. So with everything that was going on this week, as somebody who is deeply empathic, as I sat down to write my sermon, the screen just remained blank. And as I was reflecting in John Shelby Strong's book about our particular passage this morning, it occurred to me that these are the words that I certainly needed to hear. And they really bring to light the focus that I hope to reflect on, which is really to invite us to think about what would happen if we thought of ourselves as spiritual beings having a human experience, rather than human beings having a spiritual experience. And so I share with you from the book, The Fourth Gospel, Tales of a Jewish Mystic, beginning on page 145. Our episode from John this morning begins with a question. The disciples asked Jesus, "Who is to be blamed for this man being born blind?" The common theological wisdom of that day held that sickness and tragedy were instruments of divine punishment. Religion had proclaimed that with the all-powerful, supernatural God in charge, there must be an explanation for human pain and tragedy that protected the justice of God. So sickness meant that someone was getting what he deserved. Since this particular man's status of blindness had predated his birth, it was hard to see him as being guilty of some overt act of wickedness, and thus as deserving of his blind status. So the disciples speculated that his blindness must have been punishment inflicted on his parents. That idea had appeared before in the Hebrew Scriptures. The child born to the adulterous relationship between David and Bathsheba had died, and the biblical narrative informs us to punish his parents for their sin. It was apparently more important to protect the sense of God's justice than it was to leave God's love uncompromised. Fear of divine retribution might help to control human behavior, but the God who would punish the offspring for the sins of the parents was clearly an ogre who did not know how to forgive, and was not a deity that anyone would ever call Abba or Father, whose nature was love and whose purpose was to enhance life. To be born into this status of blindness was therefore to identify God with darkness, and an inability to escape the boundaries of the human understanding of justice. Yet that retribution punishment perspective is what the author of the Fourth Gospel assumes to be the view of the defenders of the traditional Jewish religion. So John has Jesus respond to the disciples' queries by saying that neither man born blind nor his parents were at fault, but that the man's affliction was meant to be used to make manifest a new understanding of God, a new vision of what human life can be when born into a new consciousness. It is Jesus' purpose to be the light of the world that is on trial here. So Jesus, using the name I am, and claiming an identity with God, in the words, "I am the light of the world," approaches the symbolic old Israel, now portrayed as a man who was born blind, And that is the focus of this sign. In John's story, Jesus mixes spittle with clay and rubs it on the eyes of the man born blind, and then directs him to wash in the pool of Siloam. There may also be in this story an echo of Elisha curing Naaman of the symptoms of leprosy by having him bathe in the waters of the Jordan River. In the Midrashic tradition of the Jews, the details of the healing stories are frequently recycled. It was another way that biblical authors signaled that they were not literalists, but interpreters of the new God experience. John's symbolic story of the man born blind is right in line with the Jewish practice. This man was living in darkness, which was for John the status of his enemies and the enemies of his community, those he called the Jews, by which he meant those descendants of Abraham who could not move out of the limits of darkness into the transforming light that he believed Jesus came to be and to provide. Once restored by the light and blessed with the ability to see, this man born blind set off a debate about his identity, which was reminiscent of the debate that John had already described in the previous chapter that we discussed last week, as already swirling around Jesus in regard to his origins. The religious authorities first sought to determine whether this was a case of mistaken identity. Was this man really the formerly blind man who once sat and begged in the city? Or was he someone who just looked like that blind beggar? The now seeing man maintained that his identity was real, that he was in fact the blind beggar. Once again, the religious establishment was offended because this healing had occurred on the Sabbath, diminishing, they felt, the power of their religious rules. The Pharisees vigorously interrogated this man. How did the man called Jesus do this wondrous thing? The formerly blind man retailed the details, only to have his explanation rejected once more. This action cannot be of God, the authorities said, since it violates the Sabbath law. God cannot and would not violate God's own law. So this Jesus, they concluded, must be a sinner. Others then entered the debate, drawn in by the irrationality of the religious argument. If you say he is not a God, you must then have to explain how he can accomplish this wonder, they said. The Pharisees dismissed the argument out of hand as a challenge to their authority and returned to the man born blind. What do you say about this Jesus? They inquired. He is a prophet, came the first man's answer. These police of religious purity were not content with that. So certain were they that he could not have been born blind, that they proceeded to call his parents to interrogate them. This only led to more frustration, as its attempts to find an easy way to continue protecting the religious traditions was quickly dismissed by the blind man's parents. This is our son, they said, and he was indeed born blind. We know both of these things are true, but how he regained his sight, or who did it, are questions that he alone is competent to answer. John then adds a comment, noting that they gave their answer for fear, or afraid, of those who ran the synagogue. For these leaders had proclaimed that anyone who professed Jesus the Christ was to be expelled from the synagogue. These tensions that marked the excommunications in the 80s and 90s of the first century are in John's editorial comment being read back into the life of Jesus' history. So the authorities renewed their interrogation in the man born blind, and in this debate, the past and the present were collapsed into a single period of time. This debate opened with the authorities saying that God alone could do these things, not this man, Jesus, who by violating the Sabbath revealed to them that he is a sinner. The now seeing man replied, "Whether he is a sinner or not, I do not know. One thing I do know," he added, "I was born blind, and now I see." "How did he do it?" the authorities asked, in obvious irritation at his challenge to their understanding of truth. The now seeing man replied, "I have told you once, and you didn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciple?" Recoiling in denial at such a possibility, they proceeded to revile him, saying, "You are his disciples. We are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses," they added. "That is the claim of the scriptures. But we do not know the origins of this man." To this strange argument, the formerly blind man said, "This is a marvel. You do not know where he comes from, but he has opened my eyes. If this man were not of God, he could not have done this wonder." Recognizing that the facts were not sustaining their traditional view, the authorities resorted to anger and denunciation, as religious defenders of the faith are prone to do. "You were born in utter sin, and you would teach us?" And they cast him out of the synagogue. "You cannot be right," they appeared to say. "If you are right, then our religion is wrong." Every religious institution and every religious form in history has had at some point in its history to walk through this particular doorway. Jesus, hearing that the formerly blind man had been expelled from the faith community in which he had been raised, went to him. The conversation once again was directed to the followers of Jesus, who, at the time of the writing of this gospel, had endured a similar expulsion from the synagogue. John clarifies the issues. "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" Jesus asked, using the most popular of the messianic titles. "Who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" the man replied. "You have seen him, and it is he who speaks to you," Jesus responded. "Lord, I believe," the man said, and he worshipped Jesus. Since worship was reserved for God alone, the author of this gospel was asserting that God had been met, had been engaged, and was indeed present in the life of this Jesus. Then John had Jesus explain that narrative. "For judgment I came into this world, that those who do not see may see, and that those who see, or who claim to see, may become blind." Then it dawned on the established religious leaders that Jesus is saying that they are the ones born blind, that they are the ones who are blind. In Jesus, God has offered them light and seeing. If they were really blind, they would be guiltless. Their guilt lies in the fact that they claim to see when they do not see. The conflict between the Jewish Johannine community and the Jewish synagogue leaders was intense. It had to do with their response to the Jewish Jesus as the light of the world. If the Jewish traditionalists could not move out of the past and walk into the light that Jesus came to give, said John, then they were choosing to live in darkness, to hide in the religious security of yesterday. John asserted, is to make a virtue out of closed minds. That is to pretend to be seeing when in fact one is still blind. That is to act as if the truth of God had been or could be captured in the religious forms of the past. That is to refuse to step into the new life being offered, the new consciousness that invites the world into a new and unlimited understanding of what life is all about. That is to refuse to step beyond human limits into the universal consciousness that Jesus opens for all to see and to enter. That is why it is necessary, John said, to understand that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. That is why Jesus can be made to claim that he is the doorway into eternity, the only pathway into God. Jesus, the fully human one, offers the only pathway to God, because the pathway into divinity can be found only through the expansion and the transcendence of the limits of the human. And so indeed, I close again with the question I began. Are we spiritual beings having a human experience, or human beings having a spiritual experience? Amen. I'm going to invite Phil to come and share with us, lead us in the Apostles' Creed.
Please join me in this affirmation of faith known as the Apostles' Creed. You need copies of it there, or some of it. I believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. I believe in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, who was conceived by the power of the Holy Spirit, and born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and was buried. He descended to the dead. On the third day he rose again. He ascended into heaven, and is seated at the right hand of the Father. He will come again to judge the living and the dead. I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and the life everlasting. Amen.
Thank you, Phil. They invite us now to join together in singing our second hymn, number 163, Many Are the Light Beams, and we will sing all 5 verses. Annie, will you play it through first? time of prayer and community. Lord, first we'll take a time of silence to reflect on God's love in our hearts. And I will invite us to lift our prayers of joy and our prayers of concern. And I will reply with healing spirit. And I invite you to join me in saying, receive our prayers. I invite those who are on Zoom, if you would like to share your prayers, to unmute and share them aloud as well. Let us be together in this time of prayer, first with a moment of silence. God of light and of love, we ask that you hear now the prayers that we have brought with us this morning, both of joy and of concern.
We pray for the people of Ukraine and also for the people of Russia in the many sentiments expressed by John Dorhauer from the UCC this morning.
Healing Spirit, receive our prayers. Prayers of continued healing for Eleanor Kimball and Kathy Cruson. Healing Spirit, receive our prayers. Prayers also of continued healing for Sue Butt and Bill Swenson and Doug Adams. Healing Spirit, receive our prayers.
Prayers for the growth of faith in all people.
Healing Spirit, receive our prayers. Heavenly Creator, we are not altogether convinced that darkness is a thing of the past. Many people in this world feel that this world is one of darkness and gloom. Pressures crowd in upon us and get us down. The causes are varied: bereavement, illness, money, worries about family, trouble at work or not having work, drugs, drink, boredom, doubt, weariness, futility, war, and oppression. And then there are the additional world issues of poverty and climate change, disease, unfair trade, and so on. It does not help when we feel that as Christians we should be doing so much better than we are. Gracious and loving God, we rejoice that you are with us in our troubles. You know us and you love us always. Even though we have made a mess of things personally and collectively, you remain faithful. We rejoice that your Son came not to a perfect world, but to a broken world, our world, to bring light to the darkness, our darkness. We pray for our dark and weary world, our world in need not just of a technical fix, but in need of love and grace, forgiveness and new life, hope, peace, and fellowship, in need of renewal, in need of you. We pray that you would come alongside us and all those whom we pray for, that you would show us Jesus, the light of the world, the one who came and who comes to turn us back from sin, to give us life and health and peace, peace that passes all understanding, not a temporary respite from trouble, but the strength to overcome it and ultimately receive life eternal. Amen. I invite you to join with me now as we share in the prayer that Jesus first taught us, saying, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Having received new life through the generosity of God and the hope that Christ brings, let us give thankfully and abundantly that we may be called God's generous people. Please join with me in our prayer of gratitude. Holy One, blessed are you who entrust to our care and use the richness of creation. Through our tithes and offerings, we return to you a portion of that which you have given to us. May they be a means of serving you in the mission to which you have called us. Through Jesus Christ. Amen. Let us join now together in singing our hymn of parting, number 160, Jesus, the light of the world, and we will sing verses 2 through 4. Jesus,